You know what I see when I look at you? A charity case. A kid who got lucky with a scholarship, sitting in my lecture hall, pretending he belongs with real mathematicians.
Dr. Gerald Whitmore wrote an equation.
This took me 10 years to solve. 10 years. With a PhD from Princeton. I'm gonna let you try it right now. In front of everyone. So when you fail, we can stop pretending. A free ride in a duct tape textbook.
I'll try, Professor.
You'll try? That's adorable. You'll try? That's adorable.
Have you ever watched a professor bet his reputation on humiliating a black child, without knowing that child was about to solve his life's work in minutes? Man, that scene right there, it messes with you. It really does. This is Kane Uncovers, and I go digging in the stories people with power wish would just disappear. So pull up a chair, put your phone down for a second, because what this 15-year-old kid is about to do inside that lecture hall, you're gonna wanna remember it. He's the template. He's just the one who got caught in writing. Isaiah Powell lived with his grandmother in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago. The building had a broken elevator that nobody had fixed in 3 years. She worked the night shift, cleaning offices in a downtown high-rise, coming home at 5 in the morning with sore feet and a smile she saved just for him. She had raised him since he was 6. His mother passed when he was 5. His father was never in the picture. It was just the two of them, a stack of library books, and a cracked cell phone he used to watch free math lectures online until 2 in the morning. Isaiah was 15 years old, and he was a sophomore in high school by day, a college-level math student by afternoon. Lockridge University had one of the top math programs in the country, and they ran a program for gifted teenagers from Chicago public schools. 4 students got picked every year. Isaiah was the only black kid in the program that fall. He rode the bus 45 minutes each way. He sat in a 200-seat lecture hall in his high school uniform, surrounded by graduate students in their 20s. Some of them looked at him like he was a tourist. Some of them looked at him like he shouldn't be there at all. The man at the front of that lecture hall was Dr. Gerald Whitmore, 58 years old, Princeton PhD, 3 published textbooks. He had advised 2 Fields Medal nominees. In the Lockridge Math Department, his word was final. He decided who got funding, who got letters of recommendation, who moved forward, and who disappeared. And Dr. Whitmore had never, in 26 years at Lockridge, passed a black student through his advanced seminar. He didn't think this made him racist. He thought it made him a man of standards. On the 3rd day of the semester, Isaiah turned in a problem set. It was flawless. Every step was correct. Whitmore gave him a B+ and wrote 1 line in red pen at the top of the page. Correct, but lacks rigor in presentation. A graduate student named Nathan Moore turned in a nearly identical solution 3 days later and got an A. Isaiah noticed. He didn't say anything. In class, Whitmore called on him once and got his name wrong on purpose. Isaac, Elijah, whatever your name is. He said it with a small smile, like it was a joke the whole room was in on. Isaiah corrected him, politely. 3 times over 3 weeks. Whitmore kept doing it. Now, the reason all of this mattered, the reason Isaiah couldn't just transfer out or keep his head down, was a competition, the Holcomb Mathematics Open. It was held every year in the university's grand atrium. 500 seats, a live stream. Faculty from 3 other universities came to watch, and the winner received a $10,000 fellowship plus a guaranteed spot in the program for the following year. Isaiah needed that fellowship. Without it, he lost his spot in the program. Without the program, he went back to his public high school with no advanced math classes. Back to teaching himself from library books. Back to the cracked phone. His grandmother had signed the permission slip with a shaking hand. "You go show them what my boy can do," she said. That was all she said about it. The chair of the Holcomb Open Judging Panel was Dr. Gerald Whitmore. One afternoon, Isaiah stayed late to ask a question after class. Whitmore was packing his briefcase. He didn't look up. "Professor, I had a question about the second problem." "Mr. Powell, let me save you some time." Whitmore finally raised his eyes. "Kids like you from your kind of neighborhood, you come in here excited for a semester, and then reality catches up. You get tired. You go back home. And that's fine. That's a reasonable outcome for most people. Don't feel bad about it." He clicked his briefcase shut and walked past Isaiah without waiting for a response. Isaiah stood alone in that empty lecture hall for a long time. What happens when the man in charge of your only way out has already decided you're not going anywhere? 2 weeks later, Dr. Whitmore walked into the lecture hall with a different energy, sharper, almost excited. He set his coffee down and faced the room. "The Holcomb Open is 3 weeks away, and I've decided to add a qualifying round." The room shifted. Whispers. Nathan Moore leaned forward in his seat. "Starting today, to be eligible for the Open, every student in this program has to pass a live board challenge. You'll come up here, one at a time, and you'll solve a problem I assign to you, in 15 minutes, in front of the class. No notes, no calculator. If you pass, you compete. If you fail, you're out. Simple." He pulled out a folder and began handing out problems. Nathan got a standard graduate-level optimization problem. 2 other students got similar difficulty levels. One by one, the problems went out. The room settled. Then, Whitmore reached Isaiah. He held the page in the air for a moment, like he was enjoying it. "Mr. Powell, I picked something special for you." He dropped the page on Isaiah's desk. Isaiah looked at it. It was a nonlinear partial differential equation with 3 layered constraints. It was not the same difficulty as what Nathan had gotten. Not even close. It was the kind of problem you'd see on a second-year graduate exam. For a 15-year-old, in 15 minutes on a blackboard, in front of 200 people, it was designed to break him. "Any questions?" Whitmore asked, already walking back to the front. "No, sir." After class, Isaiah sat on the bus holding the problem sheet. Terrence Davis, his roommate in the program dorm he stayed in twice a week, met him at the apartment that night. Terrence was 17, 2 years older, studying engineering, and he was the only other black kid in the honors housing wing. "Let me see it," Terrence said. Isaiah handed him the page. Terrence read it, then read it again, then looked up. "Bro, this is not the same problem he gave Nathan." "I know. This is like a PhD qualifying exam problem. He's setting you up." "I know. So, what are you going to do?" Isaiah looked at the paper for a long time. He thought about his grandmother signing the permission slip. He thought about her working the night shift. He thought about the 50-cent calculus book he'd found at the library sale when he was 10, the one that started all of this. "If I run from this," he said quietly, "I run from everything." He studied in the Lockridge Library until 2 in the morning. The janitor finally asked him to leave. Isaiah walked the 3 blocks to the bus stop in the October cold with his hands jammed into his hoodie pockets. His notebook was tucked under his arm. Inside the front cover, taped carefully, was a photograph of his grandmother on her 60th birthday. He rode the last bus home. His grandmother was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. "You're up late, baby." "I had a big problem to work on." "Did you figure it out?" He smiled. "I will." She kissed the top of his head and went to bed. Isaiah sat at the table until sunrise, pencil moving, page after page. The next morning, he would walk into that lecture hall and face a trap designed by a man who had already decided he would fail. Would he have any idea what he was about to unleash? "Bro, can we just sit with this for a second?" A 15-year-old kid studying till sunrise, walking through Chicago in October with a duct-tape notebook under his arm because a grown man with a Princeton PhD handed him a problem built to humiliate him. That's not teaching. That's bullying. With a chalkboard. This is Kane Uncovers. And I swear, the next scene, it's gonna feel real good. The next day, the lecture hall was full. Word had gotten around. Some students had come just to watch. The front rows were packed with graduate students. Whitmore stood at the side of the room, arms crossed, a satisfied look on his face. "Nathan, you're up first." Nathan Moore walked to the front. He solved his problem in 11 minutes. Clean, efficient work. Whitmore nodded approvingly and wrote a check mark next to his name. Qualified. 2 more students went. Both passed. The room was warming up now. Whitmore checked his watch. "Mr. Powell, last but not least." Isaiah stood up. He was wearing his high school uniform, khakis and a polo. His sneakers were old. He walked to the front of the room slowly. He picked up a piece of chalk. Whitmore leaned against the side wall and crossed his arms. 15 minutes, Mr. Powell. Try not to embarrass yourself." Isaiah looked at the board. He didn't write anything for the first 30 seconds. He just stared. You could hear the overhead fluorescent lights buzzing. Then, calmly, he began. He didn't attack the equation directly. The first thing he did was rewrite it in a different form. He recognized that the equation had a hidden symmetry, a structural pattern that, if you saw it, let you collapse half the complexity. Most graduate students wouldn't have spotted it in 15 minutes. Isaiah saw it in 30 seconds. Whitmore's eyebrows twitched, just slightly. Isaiah worked through the decomposition step by step. His handwriting was neat and fast. You could hear the chalk tapping against the board in a steady rhythm. The room was quiet. Students were leaning forward now. 3 minutes in, something happened. Isaiah stopped writing. He took a step back. He stared at the original equation Whitmore had written for him. Then he turned around and faced the professor. "Dr. Whitmore, I believe there's an error in the problem statement." The room went silent. Whitmore's smile froze. "Excuse me?" "There's a sign error in the second boundary condition," Isaiah said. His voice was steady, not aggressive, not smug, just matter of fact. "It contradicts the first condition. As the problem is written, there is no solution in any non-trivial domain. It's unsolvable." He paused. The room held its breath. "But I think you meant to write it this way." Isaiah turned back to the board and rewrote the second condition with the sign corrected. "If that's the intended problem, then the solution proceeds like this." And he kept going. Key line, pointing out the flaw. "There's a sign error in the second boundary condition. The problem, as stated, is unsolvable. But I think you meant to write it this way. And if that's the intended problem, the solution proceeds like this." Whitmore did not move. His arms were still crossed, but his face had gone a shade paler. A graduate student in the third row whispered something to the student next to him. Nathan Moore was staring at the board with his mouth slightly open. Isaiah kept working. He used the corrected problem and broke it into 2 subproblems. The first subproblem he solved by applying a transformation that eliminated one of the variables entirely. The second subproblem he handled by recognizing a symmetry argument that collapsed 3 separate terms into one. He didn't brute force anything. He didn't use any advanced tricks a 15-year-old shouldn't know. He just saw the problem clearly, and he made the simplest choices at every step. At the 12-minute mark, he wrote the final line and underlined it. He set the chalk down in the tray. He turned around and faced the room. 12 minutes. He had solved a graduate-level problem, corrected his professor's error, and finished 3 minutes under the clock. The room was completely silent for a beat. Then a single student in the back started clapping. Slowly at first, then another, then a third. The applause spread through the room like a wave until half the lecture hall was clapping. Not the loud, victorious kind of applause, the stunned kind, the kind you hear when people don't quite know what else to do. Nathan Moore was not clapping. He was staring at his own hands on his desk, like he was trying to figure something out. Whitmore pushed himself off the wall. He walked to the front of the room. He looked at the board. His eyes moved line by line through Isaiah's work. You could see him checking it, trying to find a mistake, any mistake. His jaw was tight. He found nothing. He turned to the roster on his podium. He picked up a pen. He wrote "qualified" next to Isaiah's name. Then he said, without looking up, "Class dismissed." Isaiah picked up his backpack from his seat. He walked out of the room quietly. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just walked out. In the hallway, Terrence was waiting. Terrence had snuck in the back of the lecture hall to watch. He grabbed Isaiah by both shoulders. Bro, do you know what you just did?" Isaiah looked down at his sneakers. "I think I just made him really angry." Terrence laughed and then stopped laughing, because he realized Isaiah was right. A Princeton professor had just been publicly corrected in front of 200 people by a 15-year-old black kid he had tried to humiliate. What do you think a man like that does next? 3 weeks until the Holcomb Open. The campus blog picked up the story first. Some student had been in the lecture hall with their phone out and caught a blurry video of Isaiah at the board. The headline read, "15-year-old high school sophomore corrects Whitmore equation in real time." By the next morning, the video had 3,000 views. By that afternoon, it had 30,000. Isaiah didn't check social media. His grandmother didn't have Wi-Fi at the apartment. But when he walked into his high school chemistry class the following Monday, every head turned and stared. His chemistry teacher nodded at him with a kind of quiet respect she had never shown before. A girl from his grade came up to him at lunch and said, "My dad's an engineer. He watched your video like 6 times." Isaiah mumbled a thank you and kept walking. At Lockridge, the reaction was different. Some students now nodded at him in the hallways. A few came up and introduced themselves, asking if he wanted to join their study groups. But others, the ones who had ignored him for weeks, now looked at him with something colder, like he had broken a rule by being good at this. And Dr. Whitmore made his next move. He did it the way a man with institutional power always does it, quietly, officially, and fully within his rights. 3 days before the Open, he sent out an email to all finalists. The competition format was being updated. There would now be a faculty challenge round added to the competition. In this round, each finalist would solve a problem personally selected by Dr. Whitmore himself. This had never been part of the Holcomb Open before. It was technically within the chair's authority to modify the format. The email was signed, "I believe this edition will truly test our finalists under the most rigorous conditions. Sincerely, Dr. Gerald Whitmore." Terrence read the email over Isaiah's shoulder. Bro, he's not even hiding it. Isaiah closed the laptop. That same week, Nathan Moore approached Isaiah in the Lockridge Library. Nathan was 24, tall, a second-year doctoral student. He had been a top student in Whitmore's seminars for 3 years. He sat down across from Isaiah without asking and put a folder on the table. "I don't know how you caught that boundary error," Nathan said. "I've sat through 3 years of Whitmore's classes, and I've never once seen him make a mistake like that. Either he made it on purpose as a test, or he genuinely didn't see it. I don't know which is worse." Isaiah didn't respond. Nathan pushed the folder across the table. "These are old Holcomb Open problems from the last 10 years. Whitmore kept copies in a cabinet in his office. I made copies for my own prep. I'm giving them to you." Isaiah looked at the folder, then at Nathan. "Why?" Nathan hesitated. He rubbed his jaw. "I'm not doing this because I like you. I don't know you. I'm doing this because the competition is supposed to be fair, and it isn't. And because I watched a man try to break a 15-year-old in a classroom last week, and I didn't say anything. And that's been sitting with me." He stood up. "Good luck, Isaiah." He walked away. That afternoon, word spread that Professor Helen Crawford, a visiting scholar from MIT, would be in attendance at the Holcomb Open. She was one of the top mathematicians in the country. She didn't travel for events like this. But she was coming. Isaiah had now stepped into a bigger arena. A lecture hall of 200 had become a grand atrium of 500, with a live stream, with visiting faculty from other universities, with a mathematician of international standing watching from the front row. The Open was 3 days away. Isaiah sat on the floor of his grandmother's apartment that night, the folder from Nathan open in front of him. 10 years of competition problems spread across the rug. His grandmother brought him a plate of rice and beans. She didn't ask what he was working on. She just kissed his forehead and went to bed. He stayed up until 4 in the morning, not solving problems, just reading them, looking for patterns, building a map of how Whitmore thought. Because if you're walking into a trap set by a man who wants you to fail, the first thing you have to understand is how that man builds traps. Isaiah was learning how, and somewhere in his office across the city, Dr. Whitmore was putting the finishing touches on a problem of his own, one he would save until the exact moment it could do the most damage. What do you do when the most powerful man in your field has decided to use his life's work as a weapon against you? 14 days until the Holcomb Open. Isaiah's schedule was brutal. High school from 8 to 3, bus to Lockridge, class from 4 to 6, library from 6 to 10, bus home, dinner with his grandmother, homework until midnight, math prep until 2 in the morning, 5 hours of sleep, wake up, do it again. He lost 4 pounds in the first week. His grandmother noticed. She started packing him an extra sandwich in his backpack. 13 days out. Terrence came over with a stopwatch and a stack of the old Holcomb problems from Nathan's folder. He timed Isaiah on a problem from 3 years ago. Isaiah solved it in 8 minutes. The previous year's winner had taken 22. Terrence stared at the stopwatch. "Bro, are you even human?" Isaiah shrugged. It was symmetric. Once you see the symmetry, the rest is just bookkeeping. Terrence did not know what symmetry meant in that context, but he knew what he had just watched. 11 days out. Isaiah stayed after his afternoon class to ask Dr. Carolyn Bennett a question. Dr. Bennett was the dean of the mathematics department, 64 years old, quiet, careful. She had a gray streak in her hair and kept a framed photo of her late husband on her desk. "Dr. Bennett, I had a question about the competition rules." She looked up from her laptop. "Come in, Mr. Powell." He stood in her doorway, holding a copy of the rule book. "Does the judging panel have the ability to ask a competitor to redo any part of their work?" She studied him for a moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out his transcript. She looked at it carefully. Perfect scores in every course, except Whitmore's, a B+. Her eyebrows moved slightly. "Mr. Powell, the Holcomb Open is judged on the math, not on opinions, not on hunches, just on the math. If anyone tries to change that, they will answer to me." That was all she said, but Isaiah nodded. He walked out feeling, for the first time in a month, like there was at least one adult in that building who wasn't against him. 9 days out. His grandmother's hours got cut at the cleaning company. She started taking a second weekend shift at a diner near their apartment. Isaiah offered to drop out of the program to help pay rent. She grabbed his face with both hands and said, "Don't you ever say that to me again." 7 days out. Oh wait, let me be clear. 8 days out. Whitmore assigned Isaiah's lecture section a massive extra grading load, citing understaffed teaching assistants. It wasn't illegal. It was clearly designed to eat into Isaiah's preparation time. Isaiah graded papers until 3 in the morning that night. Then he studied anyway, sitting at his grandmother's kitchen table with a cup of coffee she had made him before she left for work. 6 days out. Isaiah noticed something important. Going through the old Holcomb problems, he saw that Whitmore consistently favored a specific type of transformation in the problems he designed. If you knew the pattern, you could anticipate his moves. Isaiah drew a map of it in his notebook. He called it Whitmore's signature. 5 days out. Terrence started quizzing him on rapid-fire problem types during the bus ride to Lockridge. Isaiah answered every one in under 90 seconds. 4 days out. Isaiah's phone rang during class. He stepped outside the lecture hall to answer it. It was his cousin Marcus. Wait, no, I need to correct myself. The cousin's name is not Marcus. The call was from his Aunt Denise. She was calling from a hospital. "Isaiah, baby, your grandma had a stroke this morning at the diner." Isaiah's stomach dropped. "Is she?" "She's okay. It was mild. She's stable. But the doctors want to keep her overnight for observation, and she's going to need to take some time off work. You hear me? She's okay. I'm coming right now. Isaiah, listen to me. She asked me to tell you something. What? There was a pause on the line. She said, "You finish what you started, baby. Don't you dare come to this hospital. You finish what you started." That's what she said. Isaiah leaned against the hallway wall. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor. He pressed the phone against his forehead. Isaiah? I'm here. She's okay, baby. She's gonna be okay. You just do what she told you. He hung up. He sat on the floor of that hallway for a long time. Then he stood up. He walked back into the lecture hall. He took his seat. He opened his notebook. He kept working. That night, he went to the hospital anyway, just to see her. She was asleep. He sat in the chair next to her bed for an hour and held her hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't cry. He just sat there. Before he left, he kissed her on the forehead. Then he went home and studied until dawn. 3 days out, the Lockridge student paper published a profile of the Holcomb Open finalists. Isaiah was the youngest competitor in the event's 15-year history. His photo was on the front page, next to a picture of Whitmore. The caption under Whitmore's photo read, "Chair of the judging panel and designer of this year's faculty challenge round." Terrence showed Isaiah the paper. "You ready for this, bro?" Isaiah was sitting at the kitchen table, his notebook open, his grandmother's photo taped inside the front cover the same way it had been for the last 2 months. He looked at his best friend. "No." Terrence laughed. "Yeah, me neither. But you're still gonna win." 2 days out. Isaiah took a long walk along Lake Michigan after class. The water was gray. The wind was cold. He stood at the edge of the path for a long time and just watched the waves. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about his mother. He thought about the 50-cent calculus book. He thought about what it would feel like to lose in front of 500 people and know he had no more chances. 1 day out. He went to bed early. He slept for 10 hours for the first time in a month. The morning of the Holcomb Open, he put on the best shirt he owned. His grandmother had ironed it for him a week ago before she went to the hospital. He looked in the mirror. He saw a 15-year-old kid with tired eyes and a second-hand shirt. He picked up his backpack and walked out the door. What do you think happens to a kid like him when he walks into a room full of people who have already decided he's going to lose? Listen. That phone call right there? I had to pause when I first wrote this down. A 15-year-old kid. Grandma in a hospital bed. And her whole message is, finish what you started. That's the kind of love that builds champions, my friend. This is Kane Uncovers, and whatever happens next in that atrium, she's the reason it happens. The grand atrium at Lockridge University was shaped like an amphitheater. 500 seats in a semicircle, a giant chalkboard on a rolling stage at the front, a live stream camera mounted at the top of the back wall. Faculty from 3 other universities sat in a reserved row on the left. Professor Helen Crawford from MIT sat in the front row, center, a leather notebook open in her lap. Dr. Whitmore stepped onto the stage in a dark blazer. He smiled at the crowd. Welcome to the 15th Annual Holcomb Mathematics Open. Round 1 was a written elimination round. 16 finalists, 90 minutes, 5 problems. The top 8 advanced. Isaiah got the highest score. It wasn't close. Round 2 was supposed to be the board challenge. Each of the remaining 8 competitors would solve a problem at the board in front of the audience. But before round 2 began, Dr. Whitmore walked to the center of the stage and picked up the microphone. A small adjustment to today's schedule. The faculty challenge round will now take place during round 2 rather than after. I feel this better tests our competitors' adaptability under pressure. I know this is a change, but mathematics, like life, doesn't always happen on the schedule we prefer. He smiled at the audience. Light, polite laughter from a few faculty members. Isaiah, sitting in the competitor row at the side of the stage, felt the temperature in the room drop. The faculty challenge problems were going to be assigned right now. There would be no final round for Isaiah to reach. If he failed this problem, he was out. No second chances. Whitmore began calling competitors to the stage one by one. For each, he handed them a sealed envelope. Each competitor broke the seal, read the problem, and had 30 minutes to solve it at the board. 5 competitors went. 3 passed. 2 failed. Then Whitmore picked up the final envelope. He held it for a long moment, looking at the crowd. "Mr. Powell, please come to the stage." Isaiah stood. He walked up the steps. 500 people watched him in silence. Whitmore handed him the envelope. He didn't smile this time. He leaned in slightly and spoke only loud enough for Isaiah to hear. "This is real mathematics, Mr. Powell, not a high school worksheet." Isaiah broke the seal. He pulled out the paper. He read it. It was the problem from Whitmore's own published research. The combinatorial number theory problem that had made his career. The one Whitmore had publicly said took him 10 years to solve. At the bottom of the page, in small print, 30 minutes. Isaiah stood there holding the paper. The audience waited. What do you do when the man in charge of your future has just handed you his life's work and told you to solve it in 30 minutes? Isaiah walked to the chalkboard. He picked up a piece of chalk. He set the problem down on the small desk next to the board. He began to write. For the first 10 minutes, it went well. He translated the problem into a cleaner form. He identified the main structure. He made 2 smart early moves. The audience, at least the ones who understood what they were looking at, started to lean forward. Professor Crawford was writing in her notebook. At the 12-minute mark, Isaiah ran into a wall. The transformation he had been building toward wasn't closing. A variable wasn't resolving the way he expected. He stepped back from the board. He stared at what he had written. He picked up an eraser and cleaned a section off. He tried a different approach. That one didn't work either. 15 minutes, half the clock gone. He tried a third approach. It looked good for about 4 lines. Then it also stalled. 17 minutes. Isaiah's hand was shaking now, just slightly. Not enough for most people in the audience to see, but the chalk made a small scraping sound when he pressed too hard. Whitmore heard it. From his seat in the judges' row, Whitmore allowed himself a very small smile. Nathan Moore, watching from the 4th row of the audience, clenched his fists in his lap. At the 19-minute mark, Isaiah put the chalk down. He took a step back from the board and looked at everything he had written. He could feel it. He was missing something. Or he was approaching the problem the wrong way. Or both. The harder he pushed, the further he got from the answer. He heard Whitmore say something quietly to the judge next to him. The judge laughed. Then Whitmore, just loud enough for the front rows to hear, said, "Someone should tell Mr. Powell that the back of an envelope isn't the same as a real proof." A few people in the front rows laughed. Isaiah stood at the board with his hand at his side. The chalk was in his palm. The audience was waiting. 20 minutes. 10 minutes left. And for a long moment, he did nothing. He looked at the floor. He looked at the board. His shoulders dropped. You could see him thinking about walking off the stage. Terrence, sitting in the 3rd row, had tears running down his face. He was holding his hands together so tightly his knuckles were white. He whispered, "Come on, little bro. Come on." Isaiah closed his eyes. He thought about his grandmother in the hospital bed. He thought about the message she had sent through his aunt. "You finish what you started, baby." He thought about the 50-cent calculus book at the library sale. He thought about every late night in his grandmother's kitchen, every bus ride, every problem set, every hour of every year he had spent teaching himself math from a cracked phone and a pile of library books. He thought about why he had started doing this in the first place. It wasn't to beat Dr. Whitmore. It wasn't to win a fellowship. It was because, when he was 10, he had opened a math book and seen something beautiful. And he had spent 5 years chasing that feeling. That was all. That was the whole thing. He opened his eyes. He looked at the board one more time, but this time he didn't look at his failed attempts. He looked at Whitmore's original equation, clean and untouched, written at the top. And something shifted in his mind. He saw something nobody else in the room had seen. Not Whitmore, not Crawford, not any of the 500 people watching. He saw a path. It wasn't the path Whitmore's published proof had taken. It was a completely different path, one that came from a different branch of mathematics entirely. One you could only see if you had learned the subject from the outside, without being taught the right way to approach it. Isaiah picked up the eraser. He erased the entire board. A loud murmur ran through the audience. 500 heads turned to each other in confusion. Whitmore sat forward. 9 minutes left on the clock. Isaiah picked up the chalk again, and he started over from scratch. Was he giving up, or had he just seen something the room was about to wish it had seen first? The audience watched in silence as Isaiah stood in front of a blank chalkboard with 9 minutes left on the clock. He took a breath, and he began to write. Move 1. He reframed the problem. Instead of attacking the equation the way Whitmore's published work had, Isaiah translated the entire problem into a different mathematical language. He borrowed a technique from a completely separate field, topology, and used it to turn Whitmore's combinatorial problem into a geometric one. It was the kind of move a traditional mathematician wouldn't make, because it crossed between two areas that didn't usually talk to each other. But Isaiah had learned math from library books, written by many different people, in many different styles, and he didn't know they weren't supposed to mix. In the audience, Professor Helen Crawford sat forward in her seat. She stopped writing. She just watched. Move 2. He collapsed the complexity. With the problem reframed, Isaiah spotted something nobody else in the room had spotted. 3 separate terms in Whitmore's equation were actually expressions of the same underlying structure. Once you saw the geometric version, you could see it instantly. He circled them. He wrote a single substitution. He collapsed 3 terms into one. The equation, which had covered half the board in his earlier failed attempts, was now 5 lines long. A professor in the audience whispered to the man next to him, loud enough for the microphone on the stage to catch it. My God. Move 3. The shortcut. Whitmore's published proof had required a long brute force calculation, the kind of work you could only do if you were willing to spend years on it. That was what made his proof famous, the persistence of it. Isaiah bypassed the entire thing. He applied a symmetry argument. He showed, in 4 clean lines, that the result had to hold by structural necessity. No brute force, no iteration, no 10 years of work. It was simply elegant. It was the kind of proof that made other mathematicians slightly jealous. He wrote the final line. He underlined it. He set the chalk down in the tray. He turned to face the room. 23 minutes. 7 minutes under the clock. The room was completely silent for a long moment. The kind of silence you can feel in your chest. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Isaiah spoke. His voice was calm and quiet. He looked directly at Dr. Whitmore. Keyline, the public reversal. The solution holds, Professor, and if you check the transformation in step 2, you'll find that it also simplifies a 6-page computation in section 4.3 of your published proof, down to 3 lines, using the same symmetry I've shown here. 500 people inhaled at the same time. It wasn't just that he had solved the problem. He had improved on Whitmore's life's work, in real time, in front of everyone. Professor Helen Crawford stood up. She was the first person clapping, slowly at first, then harder. The woman sitting next to her stood up. Then a professor in the second row. Then 3 graduate students in the middle section. Within 10 seconds, the entire atrium was on its feet. Nathan Moore was standing with his hands above his head. Terrence was crying openly now, his face in his hands. Students who had ignored Isaiah in the hallways for 2 months were applauding with everything they had. 2 faculty members from the visiting universities were shaking their heads in disbelief and clapping at the same time. Isaiah didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just stood there looking at the floor of the stage, his hands at his sides. Dr. Gerald Whitmore was not clapping. He was staring at the board, His face had gone pale. You could see his eyes moving across Isaiah's work, checking every line, looking for a mistake. Any mistake at all. He found nothing. Dr. Carolyn Bennett, the dean, stood up from the judge's row. She walked to the center of the stage. She was an older woman with a quiet authority that didn't need a microphone to be heard. The applause slowly died down as people noticed her on the stage. She turned and faced Dr. Whitmore directly. "Gerald," she said. Her voice was clear. "Is the solution valid?" The entire atrium went silent again. Whitmore didn't move. He didn't speak. He just kept staring at the board. Bennett waited. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. She said it again, firmer this time. "Gerald, is the solution valid?" Whitmore finally stood up from his chair. He walked slowly to the center of the stage. He did not look at Isaiah. He looked at the board. He looked at the audience. His jaw was tight. He took a long breath through his nose. Key line, the reluctant admission. The approach is unorthodox, but the result is correct. He said it through his teeth. Like each word was being pulled out of his mouth against his will. Bennett nodded once. She turned to the audience. "The judging panel confirms. Mr. Powell's solution is valid. Mr. Isaiah Powell is the winner of the 15th Annual Holcomb Mathematics Open." The atrium erupted. This was not polite applause. This was real applause. People were cheering. Several students were on their feet with their phones recording. A few were yelling Isaiah's name. Nathan Moore had walked across the aisle and was trying to get to the stage to shake Isaiah's hand. Isaiah nodded once. That was all. He picked up the chalk from the tray. He placed it carefully back where he had found it. He walked off the stage slowly, past Dr. Whitmore, without looking at him. In the front row, Professor Helen Crawford turned to the colleague next to her. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady. "He's 15, she said. 15 years old." She turned back to the stage. Her eyes followed Isaiah as he walked down the steps. The problem that had taken a Princeton-trained mathematician 10 years to solve had just been solved and improved upon by a high school sophomore from the south side of Chicago. In 23 minutes. On a chalkboard. In front of 500 people. Have you ever watched a man's legacy get rewritten by a kid he tried to break? Isaiah was in the hallway outside the atrium when Professor Helen Crawford caught up to him. She was holding her leather notebook. She handed him a business card. "Mr. Powell, my name is Helen Crawford. I'm a professor at MIT. I'd like to talk to you about a research fellowship at our institute. Room, board, tuition, a faculty mentor. Immediate start once you graduate from high school. If you're interested." Isaiah looked at the card. He looked at her. He didn't know what to say. "Take your time," she said. "Think about it. Talk to your family." Then she did something he didn't expect. She turned to Dean Bennett, who had just come out into the hallway behind him. "Dr. Bennett," Crawford said, in a voice that was polite but carried, "I'd like to request a copy of the scoring rubrics for all 3 rounds of today's competition, and for the qualifying round that was held in Dr. Whitmore's lecture section earlier this semester. I noticed some irregularities in the problem distribution that I'd like to understand better, strictly for professional review." Dean Bennett held Crawford's gaze for a long moment. "Of course, Professor Crawford. I'll have them sent to you this afternoon." The two women nodded at each other. It was a very small exchange, but it was also a very loud one. 10 feet away, Dr. Whitmore was standing alone in the hallway, listening. His face, which had been pale before, had now gone something closer to gray. Dean Bennett turned to him. "Gerald, Mr. Powell's solution will be written up and submitted to the American Mathematical Monthly for peer review. As department chair, you will co-sign the submission as his faculty advisor." "Carolyn, that's not... It's standard departmental practice for exceptional student work. You know it is. You'll sign it tomorrow morning." She walked away. Whitmore stood alone in the hallway. Nathan Moore walked up to Isaiah. He extended his hand. "You deserved this. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Isaiah shook his hand. "Thank you." He stood there in the hallway, holding a business card from MIT and a water bottle from the atrium. And somewhere in his chest, for the first time in 2 months, he felt the smallest beginning of a smile. What do you do when the victory you just won is so much bigger than the one you came for? That evening, after the atrium had emptied, Isaiah walked back in alone. The chairs were empty. The stage lights were still on. His work was still on the chalkboard. Somebody had taped a sign over it that read, "Do not erase." He stood in front of the board for a long time. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from his Aunt Denise. She had held her phone up in the hospital room during the live stream. "Your grandma watched the whole thing. She's crying. She says to tell you, that's my boy. That's always been my boy. She's so proud of you, baby." Isaiah read the message 3 times. Then he took a photo of the chalkboard with his cracked phone. He sent it to his grandmother's hospital room. He didn't add a caption. A few miles away, in his office at the math department, Dr. Gerald Whitmore sat alone at his desk. He had a stack of papers in front of him. On top was Isaiah's problem set from 2 months ago, the one he had given a B+. He stared at it for a long time. He picked up a red pen. He crossed out B+. He wrote A above it. He put the paper in his outbox. He turned off his lamp. He sat in the dark. Outside in the atrium, Isaiah was still standing in front of the chalkboard. He didn't think about Whitmore. He didn't think about the fellowship. He didn't even think about MIT. He thought about his grandmother, and the 50-cent calculus book, and a long list of library books he had read by the light of a cracked phone screen. He thought, for the first time in a long time, that maybe everything was going to be okay. Isaiah Powell didn't walk into that room to prove anyone wrong. He walked in to prove something to himself. That the mind he had built in library corners and on bus rides and in a small apartment on the South Side was real. That it counted. And when the room finally went quiet, it wasn't because the people in it were surprised. It was because they were ashamed it had taken them so long to listen. If this story moved you, if you've ever been the person no one believed in, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. And if you know somebody who needs to hear this tonight, send it to them. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Because talent doesn't wait for permission, and neither should you.